Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles. My mother-in-law slapped me across the face when I refused to fund her daughter's extravagant vacation. How dare you be so ungrateful? Do as I say or this marriage is over. She snapped. I calmly replied, okay. As soon as they left, I walked into the house and vanished. The next day when they returned, their faces turned ghostly pale at the sight. The house was empty. A single note remained. The lazy Sunday afternoon stretched out before me like a cat in a sunbeam. I was sprawled on our worn leather couch, feet propped on the coffee table, flipping through a dog-eared thriller I'd picked up at a yard sale. It was more distraction than riveting, but it passed the time. Outside, the quiet hum of suburban Boston was broken only by the occasional lawnmower or the laughter of neighborhood kids. I checked my watch. 3:15 p.m. Sophie, my wife of 5 years, would be back from yoga soon. I'd been looking forward to a peaceful evening together, maybe trying that new Thai place down the street. But fate had other plans. The front door exploded open, nearly launching me off the couch. In stormed Eliza, my mother-in-law like a floral-clad hurricane. Her face flushed, steel-gray hair tousled, those piercing blue eyes blazing with fury. We need to talk now. I set the book aside and swung my feet off the table. Hello to you too, Eliza. What brings you by on this lovely afternoon? She didn't sit. Instead, she hovered, casting a long shadow over me. Don't play dumb, she snapped. I just spoke with Sophie and I'm appalled. I blinked. Sophie and I hadn't argued recently, at least not that I knew of. What's going on? I asked, confused. It's about the trip, she hissed. The luxury European vacation I've been planning for Sophie's birthday. The one you were supposed to pay for? My stomach dropped. Ah, that trip. The month-long European tour Eliza had been hinting at for weeks. The one with a price tag higher than 6 months of our mortgage. The one I'd silently hoped would never come up again. Eliza, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Sophie and I already talked about this. We just can't afford it. Can't afford? She snapped, voice rising. Don't give me that crap. Sophie told me you've been saving. I know there's money. A pang of betrayal hit. Yes, I'd been saving, but not for some luxury getaway. That money was for paying down our suffocating debt, student loans, maxed out credit cards, last winter's emergency car repair. It wasn't optional. It was survival. That money is not for a vacation, I said, voice tightening. We have priorities. Bills to pay, debts to clear, Eliza scoffed. Bills, debts, is that all you care about? What about Sophie's happiness? What about giving her the life she deserves? I stood, no longer willing to cower under her judgmental stare. Of course I care about Sophie's happiness, I said, my voice rising to match Eliza's. But I also care about our future, our financial stability. I'm not going to jeopardize that for a trip we can't afford. Eliza went quiet for a beat, then sneered, her tone dripping with disdain. I always knew you weren't good enough for my daughter. A real man would do anything to make his wife happy. The words hit harder than I expected. I'd always felt like an outsider in Eliza's world, a world of country clubs, designer handbags, and summer estates. Sophie and I had met in college. She was the elegant city girl. I was the small-town scholarship kid from Maine. From the moment Eliza first saw me, I could see the disappointment in her eyes. I wasn't the polished doctor or high-powered lawyer she'd imagined for her only daughter. That's not fair, I said, voice tight with restraint. I love Sophie. Everything I do for us, for our future. Eliza let out a harsh, biting laugh. Future? What future? At the rate you're going, Sophie will be old and gray before she ever sees the world. Is that what you want for her? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. Eliza, please, let's be reasonable. We can plan something more modest, something within our means, but she wasn't listening. Her face darkened, turning a deep red, a vein pulsing at her temple. How dare you? She hissed. How dare you be so ungrateful after everything I've done for you both? I felt my temper rise to meet hers, ungrateful. Eliza, we do appreciate what you've done, but that doesn't mean I never finished the sentence. With shocking speed, her hand lashed out and struck my cheek. The slap cracked through the room like a gunshot, leaving a burning imprint that seemed to echo through my entire body. For a moment, we both stood, frozen, stunned. I slowly raised a hand to my stinging cheek, staring at her in disbelief. In all the years of our strained relationship, she had never crossed that line until now. "Eliza," I said quietly, my voice barely audible. "I think you should leave." But she wasn't finished. Her eyes so like Sophie's, yet filled with a cold fury bored into mine. "Listen to me very carefully, Theo," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You will pay for this trip. You will give my daughter the vacation she deserves. Or so help me. I'll make sure this marriage ends before you even know what happened." The threat settled heavily between us, thick and suffocating. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "You can't be serious," I said, barely able to get the words out. Her face was stone. "Try me. You have no idea what I'm capable of when it comes to my daughter's happiness." And in that moment, staring into the eyes of a woman who had never truly accepted me, I believed her. Eliza was absolutely willing to destroy everything over a luxury vacation. I stood there, heart pounding, my mind in a whirlwind. Part of me wanted to stand tall to tell her exactly where she could shove her ultimatum. But another part, the part that loved Sophie more than life itself, hesitated. Could I really risk my marriage over this? "Okay," I heard myself say, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Okay, Eliza, you win. I'll pay for the trip." A triumphant smile bloomed on Eliza's face, and I felt something inside me with her. "I knew you'd come around," she said, her tone suddenly soft and pleased. "Sophie will be so thrilled." As if on cue, I heard the sound of a key turning in the front door. Eliza's expression instantly shifted. Any trace of our confrontation vanished like it had never happened. Sophie stepped in, her yoga mat under one arm, cheeks flushed from her workout. "Mom," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Eliza rushed forward and wrapped her daughter in a warm embrace. "Oh, darling," she beamed, "I have the most wonderful news. Theo's agreed to pay for that European vacation we've been dreaming about. Isn't that marvelous?" Sophie's eyes darted between the two of us, suspicion flickering across her face. "Really?" she asked, hesitating. "Theo, are you sure? I know we've been trying to save." I forced a smile, my cheek still aching where Eliza's hand had struck. "It's fine, honey. I lied. You deserve it." Sophie lit up, her hesitation melting into excitement. She and her mother quickly launched into a flurry of conversation, chattering about destinations and itineraries. I stood quietly, the cold weight of resentment settling in my gut. This wasn't over, not even close. Eliza may have won this round, but I wasn't about to let her win the war. As I watched them, heads bent together over a glossy travel brochure that Eliza had magically pulled from her oversized purse, I made a silent vow. I would find a way out of this. I would reclaim control over my life, my marriage, my future. And when I did, Eliza wouldn't know what hit her. The storm that had been gathering all afternoon was about to break, and none of us were ready for the deluge. The front door clicked shut behind them, their voices fading as they left, lost in giddy talk of their European adventure. I stood alone in the living room, the sting on my cheek a stark reminder of everything that had just happened. The house, our home for the last 5 years, suddenly felt claustrophobic, like a gilded cage. I drifted into the kitchen without thinking. The calendar on the fridge caught my eye, covered in Sophie's careful handwriting. Dinner with friends next Friday, my dentist appointment, her book club meeting. Ordinary details of a life we had built together, now overshadowed by Eliza's looming ultimatum. Without thinking, I reached for the bottle of whiskey we kept tucked away in the top cabinet, a gift from a colleague, barely touched. I wasn't much of a drinker, but right now I needed something to take the edge off. The liquid burned as it went down. It was a welcome distraction from the turmoil in my mind. But as the initial shock wore off, anger began to rise within me. Who did Eliza think she was barging into our home, issuing ultimatums? And Sophie, how could she have told her mother about our savings without even talking to me first? That betrayal stung almost as much as Eliza's slap. I found myself pacing the length of our modest living room, from the cluttered bookshelf filled with Sophie's novels and my engineering textbooks to the window that looked out over our tiny backyard. Each lap only intensified the resentment, the frustration, the creeping fear. What if I refuse to go through with this? Eliza's threat echoed in my mind. I will make sure this marriage is over before you can blink. Could she really do that? And worse, would Sophie let her? The rational part of my brain tried to speak up. Maybe I could talk to Sophie when she got home. Explain our finances. Help her understand why this extravagant trip just wasn't possible. But even as the thought formed, I knew it was naive. Sophie had always been close to her mother, always trying to please her. And Eliza had a way of twisting the truth, of turning everything so that I was the villain. I drifted into our bedroom, my eyes landing on the framed photographs atop the dresser. Sophie and me on our wedding day, beaming with joy. A snapshot from our honeymoon in Cape Cod. Not the luxurious trip Eliza had insisted on, but a week of genuine happiness. And then one from Sophie's college graduation, her proud parents on either side. Eliza's smile in the photo didn't quite reach her eyes. Had it always been this way? Had I just refused to see it? I thought back to the early days. Eliza had never held back her disapproval. My job wasn't impressive enough. My background not refined enough. My ambition lacking. I'd ignored her then, confident in Sophie's love. But now I wondered if Eliza had been laying the groundwork all along, biding her time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to come between us. The more I considered it, the clearer it became. This vacation wasn't just about a trip. It was about power, about control. Eliza's grip on Sophie, on our marriage, on our future. And slowly, bit by bit, I'd been letting it happen. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, burying my face in my hands. This couldn't continue. Something had to change. But what could I possibly do that wouldn't cost me Sophie? My gaze landed on the suitcase, tucked away in the corner of the room. We'd used it last fall for a weekend trip to New Hampshire, an impromptu escape from work, family, pressure, just the two of us in a cozy cabin. No obligations, no interference. I remembered how free I'd felt, and then like a spark, a wild idea began to take shape. What if I just left, packed a bag, and walked away from all of it? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Could I really do it? Walk away from everything I had worked for, everything Sophie and I had built together. But the more I let the idea take root, the more appealing it became. It wouldn't be forever, I told myself. Just long enough to clear my head, to figure out what I truly wanted. And maybe, just maybe, it would be the jolt Sophie needed to recognize how toxic her mother's influence had become. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed the suitcase and began to pack. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I moved through the house like a man possessed, gathering only what I needed. My hands trembled, but my mind felt clearer than it had in months. As I packed, I tried to imagine how Sophie would react when she came home and found me gone. Would she be angry, hurt, relieved? I pushed the thoughts aside. I couldn't let guilt derail me now. This was about survival, my self-respect, my independence, maybe even my sanity. In the kitchen, I paused to scroll a note on the back of a grocery receipt. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I need to find my own path. It felt woefully inadequate, but how could I possibly explain this in a few lines? How could I make her see that it was about more than a vacation? Just then, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Sophie, she was home earlier than I expected. Panic shot through me. I wasn't ready to face her. Not while my resolve was still this raw. Not yet. On impulse, I grabbed my suitcase and slipped out the back door, the sky dimming into early evening. As I hurried down the path to the alley behind our house, I heard the front door open and Sophie's voice call out a cheerful hello. I froze, heart pounding, but I didn't turn back. Steeling myself, I reached the car parked along the street, tossed my suitcase into the trunk, and slid into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely fit the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I glanced up at our bedroom window. The light flicked on Sophie, settling in, unaware that her world was about to shift. For a moment, I hesitated. I could still go back, say I'd stayed late at work, apologized for being off, sit down to dinner, ask about her day, pretend everything was fine. The pull of that old routine was almost overpowering, but then I remembered Eliza's face tight with scorn, burning with judgment. I remembered the years of quiet belittling, of never being good enough. And I knew if I went back now, nothing would ever change. I'd always be the disappointment, the man who didn't measure up, the husband who failed to give his wife the life her mother thought she deserved. With a deep breath, I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. As I turned onto the main road, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. Our house, the home we had built together. Now just another place I was leaving behind. I had no real plan, no destination in mind. All I knew was that I needed to put some distance between myself and the life I was leaving behind. As the familiar streets of our neighborhood gave way to the open highway, I felt a strange blend of fear and exhilaration. For the first time in years, my future was entirely minded to shape. Driving into the deepening night, my mind raced with questions. Was I doing the right thing? Would Sophie understand? Could our marriage survive this? I had no answers, only a fragile hope that this bold, painful step might somehow lead to something better for both of us. The lights of Boston faded in my rearview mirror, along with the heavy weight of expectations and obligations I'd been carrying for far too long. I was stepping away from the comfort of the familiar into the uncertainty of a new path. It was terrifying, yes, but also unexpectedly freeing. As I merged onto the interstate heading north with no clear endpoint in sight, I realized this wasn't just about running away. It was a statement, a reclamation of my identity, a declaration that I would no longer allow Eliza or anyone else to dictate the terms of my life. The road stretched ahead, dark and filled with possibilities. I didn't know where it would take me, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally in control of my own destiny. The decision was made. There was no turning back. By the time the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, I pulled into the parking lot of a small roadside motel. I had driven through the night, my mind a storm of emotions and doubt. When I cut the engine, the sudden stillness was almost overwhelming. The weight of the previous day crashed down on me, and the enormity of what I had done hit with full force. I sat there for a moment, as though letting go would somehow make it all real. The motel in front of me was a far cry from the warm, familiar home I had left behind, a squat, weathered building with chipped paint and a flickering neon sign. But right now, it offered something I desperately needed, an amity. Stiff from the drive, I stepped out of the car and felt the cold morning air. That's when I remembered the phone in my pocket. I hadn't checked it since I left, too afraid of what I might see. But now, in the quiet light of dawn, I couldn't avoid it any longer. With trembling hands, I powered it on. The screen lit up instantly, buzzing with a flood of missed calls, voicemails, and messages. Each notification felt like a knife to the heart. I opened the first text. "Theoa, where are you? Please come home, we need to talk." It had been sent just an hour after I left. I could almost hear the worry in Sophie's voice, the rising panic as she realized I hadn't just stayed late at work. More messages followed, increasingly frantic. "T, I'm worried. Please call me. What's going on? Did something happen? I found your note. Please, let's talk about this." I closed my eyes and leaned against the car as a wave of guilt swept over me. I had known this would hurt Sophie, but seeing the proof of her distress made it hit harder than I'd expected. For a fleeting moment, I considered calling her, telling her I'd made a mistake, that I was on my way back. But then I remembered why I left in the first place. The constant pressure, the persistent feeling of never being enough, and Eliza's ultimatum. No, I couldn't go back. Not yet. Not until I figured out what I truly wanted. With a heavy heart, I typed a quick message. "I'm safe. I just need some time to think. Please don't worry." It felt painfully insufficient, but it was all I could manage right then. As I headed toward the motel office, I scrolled through the rest of my notifications. There were multiple missed calls from Eliza, and even a few from Sophie's father, John. I could only imagine the version of events Eliza was pushing, painting me as the man who had heartlessly walked out on her daughter. The motel room was exactly what I expected. Small, a bit musty, and frozen in the decor of the 1990s, but it was clean. More importantly, it offered something I hadn't had in years: space to breathe, to think without judgment or pressure. I collapsed onto the bed, the events of the past day finally crashing down on me. Still, despite my exhaustion, sleep wouldn't come. My mind ran in circles, replaying the confrontation with Eliza, Sophie's glowing face as she talked about our upcoming trip to Europe. The moment I decided to walk away, had I overreacted? Should I have stayed and fought for myself instead of running? Doubt crept in, quiet, persistent. But every time I thought about turning back, I remembered the years of quiet manipulation. The way Eliza made me feel small, the slap. She didn't even hesitate to deliver. I needed this space. I needed to rediscover who I was beyond being a husband, beyond being a son-in-law. I needed to reclaim my voice. As the morning stretched on, my phone continued buzzing with new messages. I ignored most of them until one caught my attention. A text from Mitch, my best friend since college. "Hey man," Sophie called. "She's worried sick. What's going on?" I hesitated before responding. Mitch knew the whole history. He'd witnessed the tension with Eliza firsthand. If anyone could understand, it would be him. I wrote, "It's complicated. Can we talk?" His reply came almost instantly. "Of course. Want me to come to you?" I exhaled the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Just knowing someone was in my corner made everything feel a little less overwhelming. We made plans to meet at a diner not far from the motel. As I waited, I tried to gather my thoughts. How could I explain what happened without sounding unhinged? How could I make him see that this wasn't about some canceled vacation, but about years of bottled-up frustration and invisible wounds? When Mitch walked through the door, the concern on his face was unmistakable. We'd known each other long enough that he could read me without a word. As soon as we sat down, he didn't waste time. "All right," he said. "Theo, what the hell is going on?" "Sophie's a mess. Eliza's on the warpath, and you're holed up in some motel in the middle of nowhere. Talk to me." So I did. I told him everything: Eliza's ultimatum, the slap, the years of feeling like I was never good enough for her perfect daughter. As I spoke, some of the tension I'd been carrying began to ease. It felt good to finally say it all out loud, to release the weight I'd been shouldering in silence for far too long. Mitch listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with every word. When I finally finished, he let out a low whistle. "Damn, Theo. I knew things were tense with Eliza, but I had no idea it was this bad. Still running away. Is that really the answer?" I shook my head, absent-mindedly stirring my untouched coffee. "I don't know, Mitch. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like I was drowning, like I was losing who I was. I needed space, time to think." Mitch nodded slowly. "I get it, I do. But Sophie, she doesn't deserve this, Theo. She's probably going out of her mind with worry." The guilt that had been gnawing at me all morning flared even stronger. "I know," I said quietly. "I hate that I'm hurting her, but I don't know how to fix this without going back to the way things were. And I can't do that, Mitch. I just can't." We sat in silence, the weight of the situation settling between us like fog. Then Mitch leaned forward, resolute. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're coming to stay with me for a few days. Get your head straight, figure out what you really want, and then when you're ready, you're going to talk to Sophie. Really talk to her. She deserves to know what's been going on inside your head." I nodded, a small flicker of hope sparking to life. For the first time since I left, I didn't feel completely adrift. Having a plan, no matter how loose, made me feel a little more grounded. As we stepped out of the diner, Mitch gave my shoulder a firm clap. "It's going to be okay, man. We'll figure it out." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as I followed him back to his place, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had already changed. I had crossed the line, made a choice that couldn't be undone. What came next would determine everything. That night, settling into the spare room at Mitch's, I felt a storm of emotions: fear, uncertainty, and determination. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. I couldn't go back to how things were. No matter how painful, I had to stay true to myself. It was the only way forward. The following days at Mitch's blurred together in a fog of reflection and anxiety. I spent most of my time pacing the guest room, alternating between frantic note-taking as I tried to untangle my thoughts and long stretches of staring blankly at the wall. Mitch, true to his word, gave me space but made sure I ate and didn't spiral too far into isolation. It was on the fourth day that my phone buzzed with a message that made my heart skip a beat. "Sophie, I know you're staying at Mitch's. Can we talk, please?" I stared at the screen, frozen. How did she know where I was? Had Mitch told her? The thought of seeing her again filled me with a mix of longing and dread. I missed her terribly, but I was terrified of what our conversation might bring. With trembling fingers, I typed out a response. Me. "Okay, there's a cafe just down the street from Mitch's. Meet me there at 2. Her reply came almost instantly. "Sophie, I'll be there." The next few hours passed in a blur of nerves and preparation. I showered, shaved, and put on clean clothes, trying to make myself look a little less like the wreck I felt like inside. I rehearsed everything I wanted to say, but no matter how many versions I ran through, they all seemed to end with Sophie walking away, hurt, angry, disappointed. At 1:45, I walked into the cafe and chose a quiet corner table away from the few other patrons, some college students with laptops, an older man reading the paper. I ordered a coffee I knew I wouldn't drink, and waited, my leg bouncing beneath the table. At exactly 2 o'clock, the bell over the door chimed. Sophie walked in, my breath caught. She looked beautiful, always did, but the past few days had clearly taken a toll. There were dark circles under her eyes, and the confident way she normally carried herself was replaced by something hesitant. Unsure, our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, as if pulled forward by something neither of us could resist, she came over to my table. I stood awkwardly, unsure whether to reach for a hug, offer a handshake, or just freeze entirely. She made the decision for me, sliding into the booth across from me without a word. "Hi," I said, my voice sounding unfamiliar. "Hi," she replied. We sat in silence, the tension between us almost unbearable. Then, softly, Sophie spoke. "Why did you leave?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Was it something I did? Something I said? The pain in her eyes was like a punch to the gut. I wanted to reach for her hand to tell her she'd done nothing wrong, but I knew we needed to have this conversation as hard as it might be. "No, Sophie," I said, forcing myself to keep my voice steady. "It wasn't you. It was everything, the pressure, the expectations, your mother." At the mention of Eliza, Sophie's expression shifted, tightened. "What does my mother have to do with this?" I took a deep breath. This was it. Everything, Sophie. She has everything to do with it. The day I left, she came to the house. She demanded I pay for that European vacation she's been planning. When I said no, she slapped me. Sophie's eyes went wide in disbelief. She what? No, that can't be right. My mother would never. She did, I said firmly, and then she threatened to destroy our marriage if I didn't pay for the trip. Sophie, I've been trying to tell you for years how your mother makes me feel, how she constantly undermines me and makes me feel like I'm not good enough for you, but you never seem to see it. Sophie sat back, her expression a mix of disbelief and growing realization. I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me about the slap? About the threat? I let out a dry laugh. Would you have believed me? Every time I've tried to talk about your mother's behavior, you've defended her. You've told me I'm overreacting, that it's just her way of showing she cares. Sophie flinched at my words, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't realize. God, Theo, I'm so sorry. Her apology, though sincere, couldn't undo years of hurt and frustration. I know you are, I said quietly. But Sophie, this isn't just about your mother. It's about us, about the life we've been living. I feel like I've been losing myself trying to fit into this mold of what your family thinks I should be. I'm drowning. I needed to get away to remember who I am outside of all this. Sophie reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. The familiar warmth of her touch sent a shock through me. I never meant for you to feel that way, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I love you, Theo, just as you are. I thought I was supporting you by trying to help you fit in with my family. I never realized how much it was hurting you. I squeezed her hand gently. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but Sophie, we can't go on like this. Something has to change. She nodded slowly, wiping away a tear with her free hand. You're right. But Theo, running away isn't the answer. We need to face this together. We need to set boundaries with my mother, with my family. I see that now. A spark of hope flickered within me, though I remained cautious. Can we really do that? Your mother, she's a force of nature, and you've always been so close to her. I don't want to come between you and your family. Sophie tightened her grip on my hand. You're my family too, Theo. I've been blind to what's been happening, and I'm so sorry for that. But I want to make this right. I want us to be a team. We'll stand up to my mother together. I felt my resolve waver. The past few days without Sophie had been torture, and the thought of facing our problems together was tempting. But I also knew that real change wouldn't be easy. It won't be easy, I said, voicing my concerns. Your mother isn't going to like it when we start setting boundaries. Are you sure you're ready for that? Sophie took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. I'm sure I love my mother, but I love you too, and I won't let her or anyone else come between us. We'll figure this out together, okay? I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. We weren't out of the woods yet. Not by a long shot, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were finally on the same page. Okay, I said. Together, we spent the next hour talking, really talking in a way we hadn't in years. Sophie shared her shock and confusion when she found my note along with the frantic calls she made to friends and family. I went on to explain more about the confrontation with Eliza, about the years of built-up resentment and frustration. As we spoke, I could see Sophie processing everything, her expression shifting from disbelief to anger, and finally, to determination. By the time we left the cafe hand in hand, we had the beginnings of a plan. We would go home together, but we would also begin couples therapy. We would establish clear boundaries with Eliza and the rest of Sophie's family, and most importantly, we would prioritize our relationship and well-being over anyone else's expectations. As we walked back to Mitch's to grab my things, Sophie looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of love and resolve. We're going to get through this. Theo, it won't be easy, but we'll do it together. I pulled her close, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo. Together, I agreed. The road ahead would be tough. Confronting Eliza, changing the dynamics of our relationship with Sophie's family, and working through years of unresolved issues, none of it would be simple. But as we walked down the street, our hands intertwined, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't had in years. We had taken the first step toward reclaiming our life together. Whatever came next, we would face it as a united front, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like that might be enough. The drive back to our house felt both familiar and strange. Sophie's hand rested on my knee as I navigated the streets I had driven countless times before. But there was a new tension in the air. We both knew we weren't just heading back to our home. We were returning to the epicenter of the storm we would have to weather. As we drove up the driveway, I saw Eliza's car parked on the street. Sophie's hand gripped my knee. She's here, she said, her voice full of both resolve and nervousness. I turned off the engine but stayed in the car for a moment. Are you ready for this? I asked, looking at her. She took a deep breath and nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, we're in this together. We walked hand in hand to the front door. Before we could even get a key in the lock, it swung open, revealing Eliza. Her face was a mask of concern that quickly morphed into relief, then anger as her gaze settled on me. Sophie, darling, thank goodness you're home, she said, pulling Sophie into a hug while glaring at me with a fiery look. How could you run off like that with him? Sophie gently but firmly pulled herself away from her mother's embrace. Mom, we need to talk, all of us. Eliza's eyes narrowed, but she stepped back, allowing us into our own home. The living room, once cozy and welcoming, now felt charged with tension. The family photos on the walls seemed like silent witnesses to the confrontation about to unfold. We sat down, Sophie and I on the couch, Eliza and the other on chairs across from us. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Sophie, her voice steadier than I had expected, began. Mom, I know you're upset and you have every right to be concerned, but Theo and I have talked, and there are some things we need to address. Eliza's posture immediately stiffened. What thing, Sophie? If he's put you up to this, he hasn't put me up to anything. Sophie interrupted, a hint of steel in her voice. In fact, it's taken me far too long to see what's been happening. Mom, the way you've been treating Theo, the way you've been interfering in our marriage, it has to stop. Eliza's face flushed with indignation. Interfering? I've only ever wanted what's best for you, Sophie. And if she jerked her head in my direction, can't provide that. Then what? I couldn't hold back anymore. My own anger finally bubbled to the surface. You'll try to break us up, force Sophie to choose between her husband and her mother. Theo, Sophie said softly, placing a calming hand on my arm before turning back to Eliza. Mom, I love you. You're my mother, and that will never change. But Theo is my husband, my partner. We're a team, and if you can't respect that, if you can't treat him with the same love and respect you show me, then we're going to have to set some boundaries. Eliza's face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, hurt, and finally anger. Boundaries. Sophie, I'm your mother. I only want what's best for you. Isn't always what's best for us, Sophie said firmly. The vacation, for instance. We can't afford it right now, Mom. We have other financial priorities, and it's not your place to demand that we spend our money a certain way. I watched in awe as Sophie continued, laying out the new ground rules. No more surprise visits, no more financial demands, no more criticizing my job or our lifestyle choices. With each point, Eliza seemed to shrink a little in her chair. When Sophie finished, the room fell into a heavy silence. Eliza's eyes were brimming with unshed tears. I never meant to hurt you, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Either of you, I just wanted to give you the life I thought you deserved. We appreciate that, Mom, Sophie said, her tone softening slightly. But we need to live our own life, make our own choices. Can you understand that? Eliza nodded slowly, though I could see the struggle in her eyes. I'll try, she said. It won't be easy, but I'll try. As Eliza left that evening, the atmosphere in the house felt different, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. Sophie and I were both emotionally drained, but there was also a sense of accomplishment of having taken a crucial step together. Over the next few weeks, we worked on rebuilding our life. We started couples therapy, which helped us communicate better and tackle some of the issues that have been simmering beneath the surface. We also had individual sessions, giving us space to process our own feelings and experiences. Dealing with Eliza remained an ongoing challenge. There were moments of progress, like when she called ahead to ask if it was a good time to visit instead of just showing up. But there were also frustrating moments when old habits resurfaced. Still, slowly but surely, things began to change. One evening, about a month after our confrontation, Sophie and I were sitting on our back porch watching the sunset. I've been thinking, she said, her fingers intertwined with mine, about our future. I turned to look at her, curiosity sparking. What about it? I asked. She took a deep breath. I think I want to look for a job in another city, a fresh start for both of us. The idea took me by surprise. We talked about moving before, but it had always been a distant dream, something for someday. Are you sure? I asked. What about your job, your friends, your family? Sophie smiled, a mix of excitement and nervousness shining in her eyes. I love my job, but there are other opportunities out there. As for friends, we can make new ones and still keep in touch with the old and my family. Well, maybe some distance would be good for all of us right now. I thought about her words. The idea of leaving Boston, the only home we'd known as a couple, was daunting, but it also felt exhilarating. It was a chance to start fresh, away from the shadows of the past. Where were you thinking? I asked, feeling a spark of excitement building within me. I was looking at some openings in Seattle, she said. It's a big change, I know, but I think it could be good for us. What do you think? I took a moment to truly consider it. Seattle was on the other side of the country, as far away from Boston and Eliza as we could get, while still staying within the continental U.S. It would mean leaving everything familiar behind, but it also held the promise of a new beginning. I think, I said slowly, that it sounds like an adventure, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather have an adventure with than you. Sophie's face lit up with a smile that made my heart skip a beat. It was the same smile I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, full of hope and possibility. Really? You'd be willing to make such a big move? I nodded, feeling more certain with each passing moment. Really? We've been talking about making changes, about putting our relationship first. This feels like a concrete step in that direction. We spent the rest of the evening discussing the logistics, job searches, housing options, what we would take with us, and what we would leave behind. It was overwhelming, but also incredibly exciting. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were truly in control of our lives, making choices based on what we wanted, not what others expected of us. The next day, we began putting our plan into action. Sophie started looking for job openings in Seattle while I researched the tech industry there. We made lists of everything we needed to do to prepare for such a big move. It was a lot of work, but it felt good to be working towards something together. Telling Eliza about our decision was another hurdle we had to face. We invited her over for dinner, wanting to break the news in person. As expected, she didn't take it well at first. There were tears, accusations, and pleas for us to reconsider, but Sophie stood firm, reminding her mother of the boundaries we'd set and our need to live our own lives. To my surprise, it was Eliza who finally broke the tension. I understand, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't like it, but I understand. Just promise me you'll visit and call often. As we hugged Eliza goodbye that night, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. Maybe this move would be good not only for Sophie and me, but also for our relationship with her family. In this case, distance might indeed make the heart grow fonder. In the weeks that followed, our lives became a whirlwind of activity, job applications, video interviews, housing searches, all while trying to wrap up our lives in Boston. It was stressful, but invigorating. Each step we took towards our new life in Seattle felt like a step towards a stronger, healthier relationship. One evening, as we sat surrounded by half-packed boxes, Sophie turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know," she said, "we never did get to take that European vacation." I tensed for a moment, memories of Eliza's ultimatum flashing through my mind, but Sophie just laughed. "Relax," she said. "I was thinking maybe once we're settled in Seattle, we could start saving for a trip, one that we plan together. No pressure, no expectations, just us." I felt a warmth spread through my chest. "I'd like that," I said, pulling her close. "I'd like that a lot." As I held Sophie in our soon-to-be former living room, surrounded by the physical reminders of our impending change, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had faced our challenges head-on, made difficult choices, and come out stronger for it. Whatever the future held, whether in Seattle or beyond, I knew we'd face it together. And really, that was all that mattered. The Seattle rain pattered against the windows of our new apartment, a soothing sound that had become the backdrop to our lives over the past 6 months. I stood at the large bay window, coffee in hand, watching the city come to life in the early morning mist behind me. I could hear Sophie shuffling around in the kitchen, the clinking of dishes and the aroma of toast filling the air. "Hey, don't forget we're having dinner with the Jensen tonight," Sophie called out. I smiled to myself. The Jensens were a couple we'd met at a neighborhood barbecue shortly after moving in. They'd become fast friends, part of the new life we were building here in Seattle. It still felt strange at times how quickly we'd adapted to this new city, this new lifestyle. As I turned away from the window, my eyes landed on the calendar hanging on the wall. A date was circled in red. 3 weeks from now, Eliza's visit. Our first face-to-face meeting since we'd moved across the country. The thought sent a familiar flutter of anxiety through my stomach, but it was milder now, softened by time and distance. "You okay?" Sophie asked, coming up behind me and wrapping her arms around my waist. She'd noticed my gaze on the calendar. I nodded, leaning back into her embrace. "Yeah, just thinking about your mom's visit. How are you feeling about it?" Sophie was quiet for a moment, her chin resting on my shoulder. Nervous, she admitted, but also hopeful. "We've come a long way, all of us," she was right, The past 6 months had been a journey of growth and healing, not just for Sophie and me, but for our relationship with Eliza as well. The weekly video calls had been awkward at first, stilted, and filled with uncomfortable silences, but gradually, things had started to change. I remembered the first time Eliza had asked about my new job, showing genuine interest in my work. At the tech startup I joined, it was a small thing, but it had felt monumental at the time. Sophie had squeezed my hand off camera, both of us acknowledging the effort Eliza was making. There had been setbacks, of course, the time Eliza had casually mentioned the size of our apartment compared to our house in Boston. But when she pressed a little too hard about when we were planning to start a family, but instead of letting these moments throw us off course, we faced them head on. Sophie gently but firmly reminding her mother of our boundaries. "You're right," I said, turning to face Sophie. "We have come a long way. And hey, if it gets too overwhelming, we can always escape to Pike Place Market. Your mom did say she wanted to see the fish throwing thing." Sophie laughed, the sound lightening the mood. True, though, knowing Mom, she'd probably try to negotiate a better price for the salmon. As we finished getting ready for work, I found myself reflecting on how much our lives had changed. Sophie had thrown herself into her new role at a local nonprofit, coming home each day with stories of the people she was helping and the difference she was making. I was thriving at the startup, enjoying the challenge and the innovative spirit of the tech scene here. But more than our professional lives, it was our relationship that had undergone the most profound transformation. The distance from Boston, from the pressures and expectations we'd left behind, had allowed us to rediscover each other. We communicated more openly, laughed more freely, and faced challenges as a united front. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table with the Jinsens, the conversation flowed easily. We talked about work, the latest exhibit at the Seattle Art Museum, and our plans for the upcoming weekend. It struck me how natural it all felt, how at home we were in this new life we'd built. "So," Lisa Jensen said, refilling her wine glass, "are you too excited about your mom's visit? It must be the first time since you moved here, right?" I felt Sophie tense slightly beside me, but her voice was steady when she replied, "We are." It's been an adjustment being so far apart, but in many ways, I think it's been good for our relationship. As Sophie went on to explain some of the changes we'd seen in our interactions with Eliza, I marveled at her strength and grace. She had come so far from the woman who struggled to stand up to her mother, who had been torn between her love for me and her desire to please her family. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, Sophie brought up the conversation from dinner. "You know, talking about Mom's visit with the Jensen made me realize something," she said, perching on the edge of the bed. "What's that?" I asked, sitting down beside her. "I'm not just nervous about the visit," she said, looking almost surprised by her own words. "I'm actually kind of excited. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there will be moments of tension, but I'm looking forward to showing her our life here, to her seeing how happy we are." I pulled her into a hug, feeling a surge of love and pride. "I'm glad," I said softly, "and you're right, we are happy here." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of work, social engagements, and preparations for Eliza's visit. Before we knew it, we were standing at the arrivals gate at Sea Airport, watching as Eliza emerged from the crowd of passengers. She seemed smaller, somehow less imposing than I remembered. As she spotted us and waved, I was struck by the genuine smile on her face. This wasn't the Eliza who had stormed into our home in Boston, demanding and judgmental. This was a woman who had also been on a journey these past months. "Sophie, darling," Eliza exclaimed, embracing her daughter. Then to my surprise, she turned to me. "Theo," she said warmly, pulling me into a hug as well. "It's so good to see you both." As we made our way to the car, Eliza chattered about her flight, the unseasonably warm weather in Boston, and the book she'd been reading. It was normal, pleasant even. Sophie caught my eye over her mother's head, a look of pleased surprise on her face. The next few days were a whirlwind of sightseeing and catching up. We took Eliza to all our favorite spots, the Space Needle, Pike Place Market, the waterfront. We introduced her to the Jensen and some of our other friends at a small dinner party. Through it all, Eliza was gracious, interested, and most surprisingly respectful of our space and choices. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were moments when old habits threatened to resurface, a pointed comment about the cost of living in Seattle, a not-so-subtle hint about grandchildren. But each time we addressed it calmly and directly, and Eliza listened, really listened. On Eliza's last night with us, after a lovely dinner at a local restaurant, we sat in our living room, the city lights twinkling outside our window. Eliza looked around the room, taking in the photos on the walls, the books on the shelves, the little touches that made this space uniquely ours. "You've built a beautiful life here," she said softly. "I can see how happy you both are." Sophie reached out and took her mother's hand. "We are, Mom. Thank you for seeing that." Eliza's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I owe you both an apology," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I was so caught up in what I thought was best for you, Sophie, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." She turned to me. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. You're a good man and you make my daughter happy.